Ron DeSantis is having trouble getting Florida Republicans to endorse him, but he also might have some trouble in the future when it comes to donors because some of them are apparently starting to sour on him. Top Republican donor Thomas Petterfy is halting plans apparently to help finance Ron DeSantis's bid for the presidency, apparently due to his extreme positions on social issues. Quote, "I have put myself on hold," the billionaire told the Financial Times, "because of his stance on abortion and book banning. Myself and a bunch of friends are holding our powder dry." By the way, like the fact that he doesn't support DeSantis's positions on abortion and book banning, I like that. I feel like you could throw a few more things in there. I mean, all the anti-trans stuff and the obvious racism and everything. Like, if you're already hitting the guy, at least mention some of the other terrible things. Maybe he doesn't have a problem with that. I don't know. But anyway, he did say it's not just him, it's a bunch of his friends. And when a billionaire says a bunch of his friends, he just means the other rich people in the area. That's all that means. They're not getting together to play bridge or something. And he's pretty significant. He's the second richest man in Florida. Up until very recently, he was the richest man in Florida. Just in 2022, he gave $7.7 million to individual Republican campaigns and conservative PACs. That was up from $7.2 million in 2020, which is the sort of money one person spends in politics that immediately tells me that their taxes aren't high enough. But anyway, I think it's interesting that his donors are starting to back off Mondale, and in particular, citing his culture war stances, which are like exactly why some, I think, deluded, poor conservatives like DeSantis in the first place.
Yeah, and I think you see now they have this. The Republican Party has come to this point where, okay, you're gonna serve the money donors or you're gonna serve the people. And the base is what you need in the Republican primary to get out of the primary. So at this point, I guess DeSantis is saying these donors can go bye-bye because I need to win the base. And to win the base, you got to out-Trump Trump. The problem with that is you need money to out-Trump Trump because Trump's gonna generate a lot of free press, which he did. He generated billions of dollars worth of free press in his first presidential run. So what DeSantis is up against is reality. Reality. You're trying to out Trump in a game that you can't win because donors are scared of you. Plus, you have no national record and your backbone isn't really there. We've seen people push back on policies and you fail epically.
Yeah.
And I think it would be important if people don't forget that the reason he became governor in 2018 is a fault of the Democratic Party, not because some excellent race he was winning. He was losing that race up until a few weeks, according to the polls. But if you saw how Democrats performed in the primary, they outperformed Republicans in the primary in 2018. And Andrew Gillum was poised to win that election, except for he turned over his entire field team that had just won him in the primary with record turnout to the Democratic Party. And that was a bad idea because they weren't knocking on doors. And when they were using whitewashed messaging to reach. I mean, you were sending regular English language to completely black communities that were Haitian speaking communities. So these people don't even speak English and you're sending them lit. This is why we saw 13% of black women in Florida vote against Andrew Gillum in 2018. Bad policies, bad practices on the Democratic Party put DeSantis in place. That's not gonna happen on the national level because there's gonna be so much money spent against him if he was to beat Donald Trump.
Yeah, by the way, I am so glad that you brought that up because you're right. Like everybody like thinks about this last election. They're like, oh, DeSantis was always gonna win. It's a super red district. It was a super close race anyway. It was totally winnable. And I don't wanna go off on a long tangent, but imagine how much would be different right now if that race had gone differently. Not only would Ron DeSantis, I don't know, maybe he'd be running again next time, but that would probably be the extent of his national platform. We wouldn't have the 6-week abortion ban in Florida, all the nonsense that's happened with trying to destroy schools and ban the teaching of history and everything. Oh, you wouldn't have Ron DeSantis been unilaterally creating a redistricting map that sent multiple congressional seats to the Republicans. Like either the Republican majority in the House right now would be incredibly minor, 1 or 2 people, or it might even be flipped if not for that. So, man, the Democrats love to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Anyway, really fast, just to end on Petterfy, he says that if DeSantis continues to appeal to a far-right base of the Republican Party to defeat Trump by banning books or restricting abortion access, quote, the Republicans have a very big problem. Well, it's certainly gonna be a big problem for DeSantis if he is the nominee running in a national election. He's the guy that effectively entirely outlawed abortion in an entire state. Petterfy, by the way, says he doesn't even think Trump can win the next election, but he's willing to sit out and let Trump be the nominee if that's what it takes to put pressure on DeSantis, which I think is interesting. And here's the thing. Pederfy is a billionaire, and billionaires generally get almost everything that they want in America. That's the way that things are set up. But if what he wants is for Ron DeSantis to back off of the culture wars, I think for the first time he is going to be disappointed, because I just happened across this today. Fox News reporting that Team DeSantis has put out a new parody video mocking Bud Light for supporting women's sports. I am not going to play this video because it's utterly gross, but here's the basic idea. It's titled Real Men of Women's Sports. It parodies the old Real Men of Genius campaign from the company from the late 1990s and early 2000s. It says Team DeSantis presents Real Men of Women's Sports, and then begins to attack Leah Thomas and other transgender athletes, saying that they are the real men of sports. They have found a way to hack the system so that they can win. And now women's sports doesn't have real women winning anymore. It just says, you'll notice, by the way, that they're mentioning one actual name. That's literally the only name they can come up with. The rest of it's all incredibly vague, because this is a made up problem that doesn't actually exist in the real world. But this is what Ron DeSantis, the reasonable Republican, the not threatening or dangerous Republican, is using his time for. Once again, weighing in on a culture war topic that has absolutely nothing to do with him or his state, and being willing to increase the threat of harassment, violence, and even murder for transgender people because he thinks it might help him close the gap a bit with Trump. It's gross. What do you think, Mondale?
I think you're spot on. I think what's also telling is, listen, let's not disconnect this world from the past world, right? I'm talking about the banning of books and how extreme this really is. This billionaire may not be saying it for a good reason, but it's absolutely devastating. And we should acknowledge that the first time we started banning books, Southerners started believing that that the rebels that fought against the Union, right, the Confederacy, was a lost cause effort. It was a states' rights effort, and not because of slavery. And I mean, this was the power of banning books in the South, throughout the South. United Daughters of Confederacy ran this campaign that was super successful. They created a book list that said to libraries and schools, like, these are the books that you should ban if they say this about rebels, or if they call them rebels, and not if they so all of this has ramifications, and it looks the same. And DeSantis is not divorced from this information. He understands the culture war that he's playing, and he's willing to gamble at that because, one, he's raising a ton of money doing this. His super PAC just bought a seven-digit ad spend, and he's not even announced presidency yet. Yeah, so, wow. I mean, this idea that you can mock people, it doesn't matter as long as it's other than white people that you're mocking. And not just white people, those who support and believe in the idea of white supremacy, whiteness. And he's going along with that, even in a state that shouldn't even be a red state at all. But like I said, like you said, from the lack of effort from people on our side, we allow people like this to be in office.
Yeah.
We should also mention, John, before we go off this topic, that DeSantis is also the governor that's actually locking people up for voting when his state supposedly gave people with felony conviction the right to vote again, and then are telling these people to register, but locking some of them up because they have felony convictions that are violent or related to violent crimes. That is absolutely voter suppression in the craziest form.
100%. His efforts to disenfranchise people's vote is so ridiculous that even in Florida, when they were going, some of these cops, to lock up people of color for voting, the cops were like, this is ridiculous. You have to be pretty extreme to get the cops to have a problem with it in Florida, and they did. Really fast, before we move on to our last aspect, I also want to mention that Trump has hired a former top DeSantis ally who apparently wants nothing more than to destroy DeSantis now. This is Susie Wiles. I'm gonna keep it real. I don't know anything about her. She's apparently really important to DeSantis in the past. According to Roger Stone, she knows where DeSantis's bodies are buried. I don't know what's gonna come of this, but I am tantalized by it, I will say that. For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.